de nou, segurament, perdoneu que passo pel davant, segurament quan heu entrat aquí als cinemes heu vist tres coses que normalment no hi són al cinema.
You saw probably three things that are normally at a cinema. Table full of books from the bookstore where you will be able to find all of the books, all of the novels, all of the authors here at the BCNegra. You can shop around, buy or not, whatever you want. And there's another table, a black table, where you can now find the authors who were in the previous panel. And after this conversation, the authors here will be signing books there as well. And you will go back home very happy with your signed book. And finally, a table with a big box with black devices. These are the simultaneous interpretation headsets. You can request them, no problem. You will need to hand in some form of ID and you will get one so that you can follow the conversations in a different language, such as is the case in the next panel. If you need one and don't have one, you can walk to the back of the room and you can get one. And now, the Return of the Past will be presented and moderated by Marta Marne. She is a literary critic, editor, professional reader, and she specializes in crime novels. You can read her in the April supplement of the El Periódico newspaper, and there's something she's passionate about, that we are passionate about as well. She has a blog, La Pared Vacía, The Empty Wall, where she tries to give information about female crime writers who are not known enough. So you can visit it. It's very much worth your while. Marta, you have the floor. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And I would also like to welcome those listening via streaming. And one more year, again, my words of appreciation to the organizers and the festival for inviting me again and again. It's an honor. With me, I have Javier Argüello to my right, and a bit more further to the right, Withaker. And I am having tasked with introducing them, which is complex. For this type of thing, I love to look for the bios you have on the websites of your publishers or your own websites, because if you have not written it yourselves, well, at least I guess it will have your approval. I'll start with Javier, because we were just saying that we have on the table the essay that was just published this week, published by Javier. We will be talking about A propósito de Majorana, well, because of the motto of the festival, because the novel takes place in Naples. And Javier Argüello, on your website, and if I chose the source adequately, you are an author of novels, essays, you write travel chronicles, and you studied audiovisual and design, and these things change. I'm sure that you would add more things to your bio if you were to write it today. But you said you write novels, stories, and essays. The order is interesting. You may want to change it today, maybe. You would put essayist first because you published an essay. Well, yeah, maybe today I would say that. And Chris? You were born in London, worked for a decade as a financial agent in the city before you started writing, or you devoted your life to writing. And it's interesting because in almost all of the interviews I see everyone talks about your past. And our panel is called Return to the Past. Is it something that you choose?
Hello, everyone. I think that my characters are in all of the books, there's teenage characters going through a difficult time, and it's only recently that I've wondered why that is, or it's been put to me, why is that? And it's only recently that I've thought about me as a teenager and the difficult time I had, and that's the theme, a common theme in the book. You know, it's all of the books kind of ask the question: if you're a child and you're having a difficult time in life, you have a difficult start in life, can you still write the ending to your own story? Because sometimes it feels like the past is destined to dictate the future. So all of these characters are kind of looking at that question.
Bueno, en castellano tenemos, que no lo he dicho,
Well, and in
traducidos.
Spanish, I haven't said it, but we have two of your books. Empezamos por el final, we begin at the end, and All the Colors of Dark, recently published in Spanish. So, Javier, your book was published a while ago, and Chris's is very recent. I wanted to ask you both a question so that you can tell me about the plot of your book, so we can tell the audience they know what the novels are about, and we can start the conversation. So the question is, where does it come from? What is the idea, the genesis that led you to telling those stories? In your case, Javier, if you remember, because it was a while back, talking about returning to the past. No, well, aside from the title of the talk, this novel back in the day was defined as a quantum thriller because it plays with parallel timelines. So within the novel, you travel to the past and the present all the time. And how did it start? It started with a story that I heard, which is, I wouldn't say the story of the main character, because Majorana is an Italian physicist, one of the greatest physicists in history, I would say, and he mysteriously disappeared in the Bay of Naples in 1938. And when I heard about this, when I heard this story, it also happened that a great aunt of mine, she was the widow of a Nobel Literature Prize. She was in Italy. She was asked about Majorana. He disappeared mysteriously. No one knows what happened to him. And when he came up, she said, but Majorana lives in Buenos Aires. I know him. I visit him in the house of my friends who are mathematicians. And everyone was shocked, and when they went to visit him, he closed the doors and never answered anyone else, and then he died, and then I had to go to Naples and research about this. And it's interesting that the book starts with a conversation. Someone is asking someone else, we don't know who, but the person is saying, oh, why did you came to Naples again? I'm a journalist, I'm a researcher, and your friend, he just brought me here. He just brought you here? Yes, then he will continue his journey. Where to? I don't know. You don't know? No, I don't think he doesn't either. So that start of the book, I think, tells us a lot about your novel. Yeah, when I went to Naples, I went to do research, and it became a research. It was not my initial idea. My research was then taken up by the police, and it ended up in a way that can only happen in Naples. And in the case of Chris, the origin of your novel, from what I've heard, well, the idea came to you of a boy or a girl or a teenager locked up. And then, well, you tell us about it. I don't want to tell it wrong. Maybe you tell us about it.
Yeah, so I'd been writing the new book before the last book, We Begin at the End, came out, which I think really helped me because my first two books did well critically, but commercially didn't sell that well, like loads of books. And then We Begin at the End published during lockdown. And I was unprepared for how big the book would be. You know, I didn't know it'd be a New York Times bestseller, and with it came all of this pressure. You know, all of a sudden there's loads of people waiting for the next book. But because I'd already started it, I was in a better place, I think. And writing during lockdown was difficult. You know, that it felt like the whole world had gone slightly crazy, and there was a lot of noise just flowing in, so it made it harder to concentrate. But this book really helped with that because I was able to shut myself away every night, and I work really late at night. I'm a terrible sleeper. And so I was able to shut out the world and just focus on this story. And it was a story that the original pitch was, it's a book about two abducted teenagers who fall in love in the pitch black basement they're being held in, having never seen each other. The boy escapes and can't find his way back to the girl. The police, they don't believe that she's real. They think that he made her up because of the trauma of being locked away, but he knows in his heart that she is. And so what follows is this 27-year hunt for this girl who may or may not exist. And so it was kind of set up as a mystery, which in part it is. But as soon as I began writing it, I knew that it was going to encompass lots of themes, from coming of age to first love, pirates, beekeeping, family. It was telling a life story and everything that entails.
Creo que acabas de citar casi todos los temas que
I
tenía
think you
apuntados para
just
hablar.
mentioned everything I had thought of asking you about, or almost everything, so great. I wanted for both of you, because, well, earlier outside we were saying that in the panels I've been listening to over the past few days, every moderator has probably said, oh, your books have nothing in common, like saying, I don't know what the organizers of the festival are playing at, because it's very difficult to connect the two of you. Well, it's the same thing here. I think your books are very different, but they have points in common. And I think one of the most interesting ones is this duality between reality and imagination, fiction. As you said, for a year, Patch is locked up in a basement, and he believes that he's been there with a girl, but no one else can confirm that he's been there with someone else. And he goes on a quest, on a search for this person for years without the reader or the people around him in the fiction knowing exactly whether that person existed or not. Where does this come from, this idea, this play?
I think I wanted to strip everything back. So I knew that this book would be a love story. You know, the theme running through it was love between friends, between parents and children, and also between, partners. It was always going to be the theme of the story. And all my favourite books at their heart are love stories. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. Patch was difficult in that him and Saint, the two lead characters, Patch and Saint, two teenagers growing up in Missouri in the 70s, they both arrived in my mind almost fully formed. So I knew exactly what they would look like. I knew that Patch was this 13-year-old boy born with one eye. He wears an eye patch. His mum tells him when he's little that he's a pirate because it kind of softens the difference between him. It makes him feel less of an outsider and gives him this persona. He kind of swaggers into the life of Saint, who is this bookish, very intelligent girl, very inquisitive, asks lots of questions, and they're probably traits that are not as welcome in the 70s, so she learns to keep quiet. So I had them, but I didn't know how I was going to tell their story because it felt so alien to me, because it's a story that was set in the 70s before I was born in Missouri, a place that I've never been to. So I had all these hurdles to get over. But with Patch, I'd been writing the book for maybe, I think, about a year. And I was writing these scenes, these basement scenes where Patch is trapped in the basement. And I found it really difficult. I found that as soon as I started writing it, physically I felt like panicked. I had to keep stopping, start all the time. So I'd write a bit of that and then I'd switch and write some of the love story. And I hadn't made the connection between Patch and my life. And so when I was a kid, my parents divorced when I was really little. And my mum has a terrible taste in men. And she was dating someone, and he was a really nice guy. Like, everyone loved him. Like, my grandparents really loved him, but when he was drinking, he was terrible, like a completely different person. And he used to take out most of his anger on me. And one night I was asleep, and he came into my bedroom. I was 10 years old, and he pulled me out of bed by my arm, and my arm broke, and we heard the bone break. And he panicked and knew that he was going to get in trouble. And so he sent me back to my bedroom, and he told me, you're going to have to stay in your bedroom, don't make any noise. In the morning, tell your parents that you've hurt yourself playing football. And so that's what I did, because I was so scared of this guy. I went back to my room and I had a very long night as a 10-year-old in the dark. And then in the morning, I told my parents that I'd done it playing football. And that was a lie that I stuck to for all of my life. I've only just told my parents. I told my dad like 4 years ago what had really happened. And so there was a lot of transference onto the page. There was a lot of, I know exactly what Patch has been through because I've been through something similar, and I know the path that he's going to go down, and I know that he's going to have to work twice as hard to kind of right himself again. So that only occurred to me a year into writing.
Y bueno, en el caso de Javier...
And in the case of Javier, Your main character, when he gets to Naples, there's a plot where he supposedly gets there by boat, supposedly because only he knows, and his colleague, together with someone called Gringo Rose. And there is some sort of an accident. He has to jump off the ship because his colleague has fled from the ship. He's not there. No one knows where he is. He has no papers, no documents. He cannot prove who he is. And there's this play with reality and imagination because he cannot prove that he got there in that boat or with that person. Where does this idea come from? It was given to me by a crime detective in the Naples police force. What took me to Naples is the case of Majorana, who disappeared mysteriously in 1938. He was a great physicist. Enrico Fermi said there are very good physicists, others who make great discoveries, but every once in a while, every few years or centuries, there's a Newton or an Einstein or a Majorana. He was a true genius. And one day, after being in his room for years because he didn't want to see anyone, he accepted a chair at the Naples University. And after a few months, 3 or 4 months, he went on a ferry to Palermo, to Sicily from Naples, and he left a telegram saying, "I will not reach my destination. Do not worry about me. I've thought about this long and hard, and wear black for a while if you need, and get on with your lives because it's my conscious decision." The next day he sent a telegram from Palermo saying, "I'll be back tomorrow and I will tell you what happened. The sea rejected me." And then he went back on the ferry, but that's when he disappeared and no one heard about him again. That's the starting point. And in my novel, there's a journalist who goes to Naples to research this case in 2012 because there had been a discovery in physicists which was related to the physics related to what Majorana studied, neutrinos. I will not get into that. But he started researching the case, and it's this idea of swimming into the past, the potential things that happened or did not happen. There are many theories of what happened to him. One is that he went to Argentina. Another thing is the theory is he was kidnapped by the Nazis. Another one is that he hid from the world because he participated in quantum theory, the first works on the atom. And there's a theory that says that he guessed that this work could lead to the atom bomb and he wanted to get away. And the main character of the novel is a journalist in Naples, and since he has to write about this character, he starts going into his life and his work. He starts studying physics, and neutrinos are such small particles, infinitesimal particles. They have almost no mass, they almost don't exist, and they appear and disappear. And there's a metaphor connecting this to the life of this man who disappeared in thin air as if he were a neutrino. And in quantum physics, there is a main idea that says that the particle is in a certain place or not, starting from the moment it is observed, because before the particle is observed, you don't know if it's there or not. And depending on your angle on Majorana's story, he may be in Argentina, he may have been kidnapped by the Nazis, he may have gone to a monastery, maybe aliens abducted him. There's a theory around saying that as well. There is theories for everyone, so there are so many possibilities based on his story. And the journalist researching him sees himself mirrored in it because of personal issues. He starts toying with the idea of disappearing himself, and then this idea of how he disappeared without leaving a trace is interesting for him all of a sudden. Oh, I was listening to you and thinking, okay, your main character is a journalist, you're a journalist, he gets obsessed with physics, you got obsessed with physics. And Chris had a situation in his childhood that took him to writing based on those experiences. So is it really a novel, or are these your autobiographies? What do you think, Chris?
It's interesting because I had a very strange route to publishing, which I've talked about before, and everyone keeps telling me to write my life story, but the problem is I've given it away for free at all of these events that I do all around the world, so there's nothing left to talk about, I think. But I don't know any author that doesn't put some of themselves into their story. So for sure, but on the surface, it doesn't appear that way because all of my books are set in America, and I grew up in England. I'm from London, so but those connections weren't immediately apparent to me until I began writing this book and began exploring, where those characters came from.
¿Y en tu caso, Javier?
What about you, Javier? It's inevitable that your own experiences get mixed into your writing. Whoever writes, even if, I don't know, I'm a 20-year-old person writing about an 80-year-old lady, I have to get into in her shoes. And the research that I carried out in Naples, I didn't know exactly how things were going to go down. I just had a bit of information, and just like Chris says, I think, you go into a book having some data, an intuition, and something that tells you that there's something interesting there, and then you start exploring and seeing where this takes you. And in this particular case, it was a physical trip to Naples. I started finding out things with the university and with the police forces, the police officer, this inspector gave me this information about people going on a boat and jumping on the shore. I asked the detective, and I said, what if a guy who is all wet comes to your police station and says that he jumped off a boat and that his colleague is nowhere to be found? Well, the detective said, well, the first thing I would say is, if you're here and your travel companion is not here, you're not leaving Naples until we've found him. And I said, thank you very much, that's the beginning of my novel. And one of the policemen got so excited. When you tell people you're researching for a book, I don't know if this has happened to you in the past, Chris, everyone gets very excited. Everyone wants to help you. It's wonderful. What happens is wonderful. So this police officer started calling me. I have information. I'll come pick you up. And he came to my Airbnb in his police bike, and he took me to an archive. And the story became so fantastic that it transformed my initial idea, which was not so robust at any rate, and it led into this research with the police detective, university. They became characters of the novel. It's great that reality collaborates with your first intuition, and it starts acquiring details and things that would have never happened before. All of the authors I've known in my life, well, 80% have said to me, I don't know how many readers have come to me saying, oh, I have a story to tell you, you should write about this, it will blow your mind, I'm sure you will want to keep it and write about it, because we always think that we can gift you stories that then you are going to include in the books, and then maybe they're not so wonderful as we thought. But I didn't want to forget about something. Is it Majorana or Majorana? Majorana in Italian, it's pronounced Majorana. There are so many books that talk about him. One by Leonardo Sciascia. For crime readers, he is one of the fathers of the genre in Italy. And so was his disappearance so fascinating that so many people wrote about him? It was a very literary disappearance. Like Sciascia's books, they try to solve the mystery. There's not always fiction around it, but the character is fascinating because of what he contributed to physics. What he contributed back in the day, people didn't understand it. Actually, today, physicists are working on what he discovered in 1935, and they are seeing how accurate they were. So he's a very interesting character from all angles. Okay, and about setting the scene, you already said it was an excuse for you to travel around Naples. And what about you, Chris? You live in London, your novels are set in the United States. You've traveled now with the promotion of the book, but as far as I've read, you did not travel to document yourself for the setting of the book. They are invented places, and yes, you look for details such as the butter brand that was eaten and consumed in that place in that time, but you did not go there to document yourself, to smell the place, to see the trees. But we do feel like you've been there. How do you do it?
With difficulty. That's how I do it. So I was working in my local library when I was writing All the Colours of the Dark, and so I had access to travel guides and fiction, non-fiction, newspapers, old newspaper articles and photographs and things like that. So I really immersed myself in the scene, but I didn't know where I was going to set the book. I knew that it'd be set in the US, and I had a town that I had created, because in all the books I make up the town, but I put them down somewhere real. And I'm a strong believer in that gut feeling. And I was looking through a very old travel guide, and I found a picture of an area called Dogwood Canyon in Missouri. And I just got this gut feeling, this is where the book should be set. And so I began to research Missouri. And partly I wanted Patch, I said he's a pirate. I wanted this pirate to be a pirate that lives nowhere near the ocean, that has never been on a boat, because it kind of made it all the sadder. So I had some of the ingredients that I needed, and then I began to write the book, and I needed to work on dialogue. So the first year of writing the book, I wrote nothing but conversations between the two characters, between Patch and Saint, because I thought about, in your life, like your friends, your partners, how do you get to know someone? It's through conversation. So I began writing these conversations for a year. I did that, and then as I began to write the actual story, and I write out of order, kind of like they film TV. So I write whatever scene I feel like writing on the day. I might start somewhere halfway through the book, and that's how I begin. But research-wise, I will sit down and I write across 3 different screens. On the middle screen will be the manuscript. On the left-hand screen, let's say that one of the characters is taking a walk in the woodland in Missouri. On the left-hand screen, I'll have photographs of the woods in Missouri from the 70s. And on the right-hand screen, I'll have everything that the character can see and hear and feel. So there'll be what type of birds are singing, what plants are growing, what the air temperature is. I'll need every detail. I'll need to know if she takes a step, how far will her foot sink into the earth? So I have everything mapped out, and then I begin to write the scene, and I overwrite the scene massively. I describe everything, and then I cut it, and I cut it again and again and again until what you're left with is a single paragraph that makes you feel like you're taking a walk in the woodland with one of the characters. And I do that for every single scene in the book, which explains why I miss my deadline every single time.
¿Puedo preguntar?
Sí, por supuesto.
y
Can I
no te
ask
dio
a question? Of course.
¿No sentiste el deseo de ir a
Didn't you
visitar el
feel
lugar?
the desire to actually go and visit the
investigación?
place at any point during your research? Didn't you want to travel at some point?
It's a good question, but so partly I was broke. I had no money when I was writing this book, so I couldn't travel there. But also, it's been really interesting going to the place afterwards, because we were touring around the US, and one of the stops was Missouri, which is really intimidating, because you're going to someone's hometown that you've never been to, and you've set your story there. And I did it with my last book, with We Begin at the End. I set it in Montana, and the first event I did was with the Montana Press Association. And so I was terrified. I thought, they're going to get me. Clearly I've made loads of mistakes, that if anyone's going to get me, they're going to get me. But I think they were too polite to call me on it. But I don't know if it's going to... I'm writing the new book at the moment, and it's set in upstate New York, and that's somewhere I've never been again. And I don't know if that partly gives me some freedom. It doesn't tie me to an idea, because I can only ever have an idea of it, not living in the place. I can go and visit there. I can come to Barcelona. I've been here twice, for a total of 6 days. I don't necessarily think that would make it easier for me to set a book here, because there's nuances and all sorts at play, and I think I need that level of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Entonces no vamos a tener un libro ambientado en Marbella.
So we will never have a book based in Marbella.
I miss Marbella. I lived in Marbella for a year, and unfortunately, I tried to learn Spanish. And every time I spoke my terrible Spanish to anyone, they would reply to me in English. And we've had this with Claudia. I was supposed to read a page of the book in Spanish, and you can find a video online. I've never seen someone laugh as much as my Spanish.
Bueno, precisamente quería leer el arranque, ya que leí también el de Javier.
I wanted to read the beginning of the book, the first page. I'm sorry if there are any spoilers, but just for you to know how it sounds and just for you to understand the ambience. Just reading now the first page of the book.
Robles palustres y pinos blancos, las imponentes montañas de San François, que consumían el pueblo de Montacler en sombras, cualquiera que fuese la estación. A los 13 años creía con todas sus fuerzas que más allá de la meseta de Ozark había oro, que había un mundo mejor esperándolo. Aunque unas horas después, cuando yaciera moribundo en el bosque, encontraría esa imagen congelada de la mañana y la estrujaría hasta que los colores se diluyeran, porque sabía que no podía haber sido tan bonita, que nada nunca tan bonito era en su vida. Bueno, esta frase, perdón, la confusión. También quería aprovechar
So I also wanted
el arranque de la novela
to
porque
use this beginning of the
una de las
novel
cosas
because
que sobre todo haces tú mucho,
one of the
Chris,
things that you do a lot,
pero
Chris,
lo retomo precisamente de una frase que te escuché decir a ti en una
this is from a sentence I heard you say in an interview from something you said, that we never live in the present. We're always living either in the past or the future, because we're either concerned about something that has happened to us or we are thinking of something that will happen to us. And in both novels we can see this very clearly. And in your novel, Javier, there's a research about the past, an investigation, and the main character finds himself in a situation in Naples. He doesn't know whether he can leave the island. He's engaged. He's left his fiancée in Barcelona with almost no explanation. And we always have this duality. Where is this going? What has happened in the past? And I think this is something you're passionate about, this duality in never living in the present, always thinking of either the past or the future. Yes, generally speaking, this is something I'm passionate about. And in this novel in particular, there was an attempt to have the structure itself reflect some of the aspects of the physics that Majorana was working on when he disappeared, mixing different planes, different time planes. And at some point, I decided there would be 3 points in time that would overlap, 3 plots at the same time: the time of the disappearance, the other moment in time will be the present time of the investigator, and then the moment in which he had found out about the case and decided to travel to Naples. And at some point I realized that I had notes on the 3 plots, and I realized that the present vis-a-vis the future is already the past, so I did not need 2 moments in time with 2 time points. I already had the past and the future. And one of the plots that wasn't working well, I decided to do away with it and just use 2 plots. The trip to Naples to do the research, and all of the research in Naples that jumps from Naples to Barcelona a few days before, or the boat a few days after. Because the idea was to mix timelines in a way that in the end the different planes would connect at the end. I will not tell you about the ending of the book, but I wanted to use one of these ideas of physics that Majorana worked on, different time planes that can meet in the same space at a certain point. And I did not want to tell the story only based on conversations, or only talk about the physics, but show the physics in the structure of the book. I think it sounds a bit too complicated. And in your case, Chris, Patch spends his entire life thinking of that basement, and he's stuck in that basement, and we do not know exactly what he wants to do when he solves the mystery. His entire life, it's not a big spoiler, because as you read the book, you realize that it's a constant search to try and find the girl who was locked with him in the basement. But I think one of the mysteries of the novel is precisely knowing what is he going to do when he finds her.
I don't think he ever thinks beyond that. I think he goes. It's very interesting because he goes into the dark one person and he comes out someone completely different, and that's something I can relate to. You know, I feel like when I had a normal first 10 years of my life, this terrible thing happened and I came out someone completely different. You know, my brother had an easier time. He went to a brilliant university, got a good job. My life kind of veered off. You know, I did badly at school, but I also I found my way to writing because of this terrible thing that happened. So that was something I very much wanted to put into the book. You know, like good and bad things can come from negative experiences. Patch is probably a kid that would never leave the town that he grew up in. You know, he would have just stayed there. He would have got a job, helped his mother. Instead, he comes out and he's got this grand purpose. he needs to find this girl. To him, there's no more important job in the world. So he travels around the US and he sees the most amazing, beautiful things, and he lives a very rich, full life because of this trauma. He's also a kid that would never have picked up a paintbrush. He paints his idea of what the girl looks like, and it's not a spoiler to say he becomes a wealthy, successful artist, and completely changes his life. You know, comparatively, I went to a rough school in London. I would never have written a book had this trauma not happened to me. You know, I wouldn't have ended up here. I wouldn't be talking about some characters, you know, that have kind of changed my life. So it was always about getting that balance right, whilst also remembering that Patch, to him, you know, there's nothing more important. You know, like to us, it can be frustrating reading him because we get glimpses throughout the book of the life that he might have had. Like he comes back, he puts down roots in the town, builds a house, you know, and we know that's only temporary because we know at any point he's going to run off and try and find this girl again. So it was that balance, striking that balance.
Y me gustaría que nos hablases un poco para no perder el hilo.
And to continue with that idea, everything we've been saying, anyone listening to us is probably thinking, oh, the drama, a boy locked up in a basement, a search for his entire life, family drama. But it is a very luminous novel. It's very bright and colorful. It's one of those books where terrible things happen, but I would say it's even a feel-good novel. It's comforting. In a way, it makes you feel very good. And I think it's very difficult to tell such a dark story with such a luminous result. Was it your intention to write a book like that?
I think so. So the last book that I wrote, We Begin at the End, we followed a 13-year-old girl called Duchess. We picked her up when she was 13. We put her down at 14 at the end of the book. And then everyone was messaging me. I had thousands of readers messaging me saying, what happens to Duchess? What comes next? Is she okay? And so I set out to write this book to answer that question for Duchess and for Patch and for all of the kids that have a difficult start in life. And I was one of those kids, and I wanted to answer it for myself, because throughout my life I've been in trouble with the police, I've had problems with drinking, with drugs. I've had endless problems, and throughout my life I've always kind of looked back to my childhood and thought the problems began then. But I never really believed it, you know. I always kind of felt different to everyone else, but I didn't like to blame my childhood. And so with this book, I really set out to answer that question. I knew where I was heading. I wanted to answer the question for Patch, you know, can he write the ending to his own story? Is there happiness out there for someone that's had such a difficult time? And I think I managed it, and so that was my intent. Yeah, it never felt like there's a crime in it, but it doesn't feel like a crime story. Mm-hmm. And you said before about me writing my life story, there's a crime in my life. You know, I wouldn't call my life story a crime story. Yeah, so it was that.
Okay. Luego algo que
And then there's something that is more present in Chris's novel, but in yours is a bit in the background, Javier. This feeling of an adventure novel. Not so much because of the search, but the journey, the travel. We recurrently go back to the boat. We're in the Mediterranean. It's almost like a mythological trip, going back to the Odyssey, the boat trip around the Mediterranean. I don't know if it was your intention to go back to this feeling of adventure. Well, in both your books, going back to this idea of an adventure novel. The main character who goes to Naples is at a point in his life where he's stuck. He feels that nothing has feeling or color, nothing makes sense. And, well, he perchance meets someone who studied with him, and he will go on a boat to Naples. And then he says, well, yeah, I have well, he says to his publisher at the newspaper, oh, I have to go on a boat as well because my character went on a boat and I have to research him. It was his excuse to go on an adventure. And as Marta said, the investigation in Naples overlaps with going on this boat, on this sailboat with an expert sailor and someone who doesn't know anything but sailing. I've been sailing a lot. Oh, it's an autobiography. I went through the Atlantic. I went on a sailboat with a good friend of mine who is a great sailor. I had no idea about sailing. He knew a lot. And so in a way, it is based on that experience of mine. And I thought it was interesting to set my novel on the sea because he researched about Majorana, but also his work, which is quite abstract and difficult to illustrate, even in one's mind. And his colleague, Ringo Ross, is a person who does live fully in the present, in the here and now. And when he gives him information about his research, Gringo understands everything perfectly well. He's a person that hasn't read much, but he makes comparisons with the sea. Every time I go out to sea, the sea is absolutely different. Just like when you observe particles, depending on what you observe, the experience is completely different. So the sea out there is something absolutely real and tangible and immediate. I thought it was a nice way for the main character to understand these very elevated and abstract facts of physics, comparing it to such a real element as the sea. And in your case, Chris, the two novels that we have in Spanish where the main characters are teenagers, and there is a component of play and adventures from the very beginning, a big component of play and adventure. And we begin at the end. Oh, I just forgot, not the name of the main character, how did they call her? What was the nickname? But in this case, we have a pirate, someone with a patch, with an eye patch, who identifies as a pirate. So what were you looking for here, maintaining this idea of play as the background of the novel?
It was Duchess in the last book.
Duchess,
and she was an outlaw. Duchess, she looked up her family tree and found like a very distant link to a known outlaw, and so that was her persona. I think it's more than being playful.
Forajida, era lo que estaba buscando.
Yeah, an outlaw, that was the word I was looking for, yes.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yes.
Gracias.
So with Patch and with Duchess and with Saint, kind of, they're all kids that would rather blend in, like most kids, they just want to fit in. Particularly Patch and Duchess, they would rather disappear. They don't want to be looked at. They don't want to be talked about because they're worried, partly that they'll be discovered. For the kind of the struggles that they're going through will be discovered. Like both are kind of carers, young carers to their parents, to their mothers that are kind of ill-equipped to be parents. So Patch has this persona that is kind of sweet when he's little, when it's kind of cute. He's a pirate, calls himself a pirate. When he becomes a teenager, it's less so. It makes him more of a target for the bullies, and he's very much bullied. And he kind of withdraws even more into this persona. So when he meets Saint, and she's very accepting of who he is, there's a freedom to it. He doesn't have to pretend as much. But it's something that he drops, as well. When he goes into the dark, he's a pirate. He's this kid who's full of bravado. He comes back, someone completely different. Saint finds that he's thrown out all of his pirate memorabilia, and he's kind of left that persona behind, which is incredibly difficult for her because she's completely in love with the boy that went away. And then the boy that comes back is almost like a stranger to her. And so that was the basis for the story. It was half of him has been left in the basement. Physically, he's come back. Mentally, he's still there. And so Saint knows that the only way that she's going to bring back all of him is to join him on this crazy search for this girl. They don't even know what she looks like, but she's going to join him because she knows that's the only way to heal him and help him and hopefully bring back the part of him that is still lost. So it was about how this traumatic event, this kidnapping at the start of the book, has these ripple effects, not just for Patch, who is at the very centre of it, but for Saint, for his mother, for Saint's grandmother, who sees Patch as kind of destructive in Saint's life, because Saint is a girl that is destined for great things. You know, she's a girl that should be going to an Ivy League college and achieving great things, and instead her grandmother would say that she throws it all away just to help her friend. But for Saint, there's nothing more important for her to do.
Tenemos a Saint, tenemos a Patch,
We've got
tenemos
Saint,
a
we've got
Duchess,
Patch, we've
tenemos a
got
Star.
Duchess,
¿Por qué la
we've got
elección de estos
Star.
nombres?
Why those names? Why the name choices? Because the names already tell us who they are, who these characters are.
They do, especially Saint. Saint is the best character that I've ever written. She is innately good and pure and the nicest, most fiercely loyal and protective person that you could ever meet. The character's Duchess came about because my grandfather was a big Johnny Cash fan, and so I grew up listening to A Boy Named Sue, and so Duchess was named with that character in mind, with that song in mind. She's given this name. It forces a tough girl to be even tougher because it attracts attention.
Y bueno, en tu caso, Javier, tenemos al Gringo Ross, que es el único
In
nombre
your case, Javier,
que,
we have
que
the
tiene
Gringo
ese
Ross.
personaje.
Gringo
Y claro,
Ross,
encima es alguien que desaparece.
the only name this character has, he disappears and the main character is accused of killing him, and the only thing we know is that he's called Gringo Ross. Why this abstract name? I wanted for it to be his nickname, for him not to have a real name, and it's somewhat based on someone who is a great friend of mine now, boat captain with whom I sailed for 2 months, a 2-person trip. When it's a long voyage, it's interesting because you think, oh, spending that much time with one person, but you don't even see the person because you are on asleep when the other one is awake, you're on watch when the other one isn't. And it's like Sancho Panza and Quixote. Quixote drafts theories and the other one is reality. Sancho is the reality, translate everything into real immediate things. So Gringo Ross is the counterpart of this journalist who doesn't know where he's going. He wants to escape his life and is trying to understand physics. Okay, they told me we have just a few minutes left, and I wanted to end with a question, so I'll ask you to please be brief in your answers so they do not kick us out of here. And it's interesting that both of you are authors who devote a lot of time to writing your books. You go against the publishing, but the dictates of the publishing world that seems to say that you have to publish a book every year. Do you think it's important to devote more time to books? Well, now you, Javier, you just published a book. And yes, it is not an exact science, writing. And I think it's very important for the book, for you to give space to the book, to let it breathe so that it can show you where you need to go. When you start getting to know the characters at the beginning, it's like when you get to know a person, you don't know who they are. But when you're working on a novel for 8 months, maybe you reread a conversation you wrote months ago and you say, oh, no, this person would never say this, he would never answer that. And it takes time to get to know the characters, just like it takes time to get to know people. And for the story to unfold also and to show you what it needs. I'm a firm believer in that you do not decide as much as you discover. And it takes time. And it may happen in 1 year. It happened to me one time that I wrote a book in a year, but normally it takes longer. And I think, yes, you need to forget about the demands of the market because otherwise I would be doing something else. What about you, Chris? You are now selling so many books. Do you feel the pressure to have to write faster?
So my deadline, unfortunately for my publisher, my deadline is the last thing that I think about when I'm writing a book. It takes as long as it takes, and I'm 4 years at the moment between books, and I think that's probably too slow. But I knew that I had this story, and I had an important message to get across with this story. And I never get nervous for anything. Like, I do lots of TV, things like that. I don't recall ever feeling nervous. But with this book, I was nervous about it coming out into the world because I thought this is the absolute best story that I can write. And if people don't like it, I kind of don't have anything else to give them. And I would hope that is a feeling that I get for every book that I write from now on, because I think that's the way it should be. You know, people go out and spend their hard-earned money on it. The least I can do is my absolute best.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias a los dos. Ahora vais a tener la oportunidad de
Thank
hablar
you
con ellos.
both very much. Now you will have an opportunity to talk to them. They will sign books. Remember, you have to buy books. These authors need to eat. And thank you all very much for coming.